doing this. There are some balloons behind you, perfect celebratory items.
So what's it for?
Well, a magazine with obviously a substantial budget have bought and given me a camera and a few packs of film. And I've got to record between 50 and 70 working days, visually. So it's a Polaroid or two a day. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Happy birthday, by the way. And how does it feel to be 50 years old, half a century and still a pop star?
I suppose the thing that comes to mind is that I'm very lucky to still be doing the one thing that gave me a reason for living when I was very young, that I'm still actively enjoying the process of writing and performing and the very same things that I was doing when I was 16 years old.
I made that film Cracked Actor about you. I was going to call it The Collector, you know, or The Impressionist or something, because you've always taken things from other places, from books, from ideas.
That's probably what I'm best at doing. I'm not an original thinker. What I'm probably best at doing is synthesizing those things in society or culture that I find rivetingly exciting. And I guess what I end up doing is refracting those things and producing some kind of glob of how it is that we live at this particular time. I'm not a guy that gets on stage and tells you how my day's just gone. Straight from the heart. I couldn't do that. I love artists who do that, and I admire them tremendously. I don't have that talent, and it's not a thing that interests me.
People might accuse you of being cool and dispassionate in what you do. Do you think
they have done. It's not that they might.
They do. I'm being polite, that's all. After all, it's your birthday.
Very polite gentleman.
So what would you, how would you counter that? Given that
I have no answer for that. I mean, it's entirely their opinion. They're quite welcome to.
But you think you're intuitive, don't you?
Yeah. My feet are very planted in today, in now. My stuff has never... I've never wanted to presume that there's anything in the area of prophecy culturally about what I do. What's more about antennae than it is about actually understanding a situation.
She may be an ordinary girl sitting in the cinema, but isn't she as alienated as any of your other characters?
I think she finds herself let down. I think she finds herself disappointed by reality. I think she sees that although she's living in the doldrums of reality, she's being told that there is a far greater life somewhere. And she's bitterly disappointed that she doesn't have access to it. It's, you know, very hard to think back to one's state of mind so many, that's almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I understand it I understand it as, I guess I would feel sorry for her now. I think I had empathy with her at the time. That's probably the difference.
I mean, where did Ziggy come from in terms of, you know, I know we've heard that people know a lot about Ziggy, but where was there an actual character or anything at all that actually drew that portrayal out of you?
Funnily enough, it was actually based on a real person. There was an American rock singer in the, I guess he would have come out of the late 50s, early 60s, called Vince Taylor, who possibly, well, I met him a few times in the mid-60s. In fact, I went to quite a few parties with him.
Well, my baby drove up in a brand new Cadillac.
Vince Taylor was trying to make his way in Britain. He couldn't crack the States. He was sort of real B-list, C-list over there, in fact. So he decided he was going to try and do it in England. And he was out of his gourd, totally flipped. I mean, the guy was not playing with a full deck at all. And he used to carry maps of Europe around with him. And I remember very distinctly him opening a map out on Charing Cross Road outside the tube station and putting it on the pavement and kneeling down with a magnifying glass, and I got down there with him, and he was pointing out all the sites where UFOs were going to be landing over the next few months. And he had a firm conviction that there was a very strong connection between himself, aliens, and Jesus Christ. Those are the three elements that went into his makeup and drove him. He eventually went to France and became a huge rock star over there. And one night, he decided he'd had enough, so he came out on stage in white robes and said that the whole thing about rock had been a lie, that in fact he was Jesus Christ. And it was the end of Vince, his career, and everything else. And it was that and his story which really became one of the essential ingredients of Ziggy and his worldview. But it was him, his complete otherness. I'm terribly attracted to people like that. The other people.
And that otherness thing, of course, is a very big thing in all the characters you've created.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So from, you know, whether it's the character in Space Oddity or, you know, Aladdin
Yeah.
Sane, and that touching of madness,
Yeah.
which in a sense you're not frightened of it in quite that way, or how would you?
Well, I think maybe that's not entirely true. I have maybe only awareness of it these days. I'm not. I think it's been fairly well recorded that my family is pretty rampantly. What's the word? I think I'm not so sure how much of it is madness. I think that there's an awful lot of emotional and spiritual mutilation goes on in my family. And I think to a certain extent it's touched me in various ways over the years. No longer, I think. It's not a situation that has the same degree of fright for me that possibly it had when I was much younger.
Now, you've said that to me on other occasions, but because of the last few years and because I've seen you and how you've grown, I believe you now. I didn't believe you 20 years ago when you said to me,
Yeah.
I'm me, Gov, or whatever you said, something not dissimilar to that. But I sense a sort of stability there, an anchor there now.
Yeah.
in your...
Yes, yeah.
Have you just found it, do you think, in the last few years?
Don't know, you know. I think I found a greater freedom within my life by being more accepting of it, not running and searching so desperately for some holy grail, for some certainty, you know, which I think I probably felt more than others that I needed. I think that I felt often, ever since I was a teenager, so adrift and so not part of everyone else, with so many dark secrets about my family in the cupboard, that it kind of made me feel very much on the outside of everything. And because of that, I felt probably that there was no basis to my life, like everybody else seemed to have, which of course is ridiculous, but you don't know. And therefore, probably I would do things to prove that I had some emotional substance, you know, and that I knew what I was doing, you know, when in fact I didn't have a clue.
Going back to the difficult period for a second, when you just talked about how...
Oh, when weren't they, Alan? When weren't they?
But I was just thinking, when I saw you, again, at that time, you were always an aesthete, of course. It was white powder and white milk, I remember, as your diet at that time.
And green and red peppers.
Probably.
That's about all I ate.
Sort of probably the diet of a mugwump.
You saw me
William
in a good
Burroughs.
time. You saw me in a good time, I'll have you know.
You were rehabilitating at that point.
No. I was just starting my great voyage.
In Brian Eno, Bowie found a musical partner whose passion for experiment easily matched his own. What did you see in Brian that you felt you...
Somebody who really understood the the illogic of putting together different systems. I mean, I'd read quite a bit about him. I hadn't known him terribly well. I'd worked with him a couple of times, actually, when he was in Roxy Music. And first time I met him, I thought he looked more effeminate than I did. Really quite a shock. He had incredibly long hair.
It's a plus for you, that, I take it, was it?
I was rather jealous, actually. And he was, I believe he was wearing leopard skin. Leopard skin and high-heel shoes. Not the professor that we know today. He was an alarmingly glamorous young man.
But minimalism was in his soul, was it?
Well, yeah, I mean, he'd stumbled into rock music. I mean, I made I charged at it. I was right on target. I knew exactly. I wanted to be a white Little Richard at 8, or at least his sax player. But Brian sort of just ended up in a rock band when he was busy doing something else, as Lennon would have said. And he'd sort of applied, what he just did, he just applied all the things that he'd learnt at art school, really. And I thought, well, let's see if we can fuck up this part of culture as well.
Your ambitions, whether, whatever they are, whatever value judgments one makes about them, are about drawing into the world of popular music. Even however you transform them, they are, big ideas, big thoughts.
Yeah.
And you even acknowledge a certain, yes, I'm is that who says pretentious and why?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, Brian and I decided in the late 70s that we had developed a new school of pretension. I mean, that was our thing at the time. We put it about a lot. I mean, we gave it the title. Other people may bandy it around. But we knew from 78, 79 that we were the new school of pretension. We saw nothing wrong with that. We rather saw pretension, or the idea of pretending, the playfulness that has any kind of evocative kind of feeling in art, actually something to go for.
How have you've been very versatile in using your voice. How have you gone about that?
I think, again, I didn't have one role model when I was younger. How did I want to sing? And I wasn't really sure. I wasn't that comfortable as a singer because I was never that sure that my voice was really that good at any level. But I knew that I could probably project a character or an emotion, or I could tell the story with my voice if I could find the right tenor for it. But again, I was influenced on one part by Little Richard, on the other part by people like Tony Newley, Scott Walker, Elvis Presley, Jacques Brel, and I knew that I was none of those. So I thought the best thing for me to do was just sort of use different stylings for different songs. And it seemed to make sense as I got more and more into what I did as work, that that's also how I wrote, and it's how I did everything. It was a question of some rather mutant eclecticism going on. That's kind of what I did, and that's what I did well, and it's what I really enjoyed. I guess there's a kind of a voice in there somewhere. I think songs like Wild as the Wind is probably as near to a real voice. I'm no longer looking for a voice. I mean, I'm quite happy with the way that I work.
Why should you worry?
It's kind of like I have a palette of things that I can draw from and use, And funnily enough, I now see that some of them are actually mine. I'm reusing techniques and processes that, I've used many times before, and it's all really rather interesting and useful to put work together like that now. Up until '83, I'd been considered what I guess people would think of as a major cult artist. I had my own very tight, loyal following, and it had been at one continual level for quite a few years, since the mid-'70s, and I was happy enough in that particular area. The album that I did, Let's Dance, had this single on Let's Dance, which just did phenomenal business and put me in an entirely different orbit. And I was suddenly working with an audience that consisted not only of my older fans, but people who I kind of quickly realized over those couple of years, '83, '84, probably had more Phil Collins albums in their collection than, say, Velvet Underground. Is that the way that you make money is give people what they want. And so I started giving people what they wanted. And the downside of that is that I think it just dried me up as an artist completely, because I wasn't used to doing that. What I'm used to doing is being very stubborn, obscure, confrontational in my own indulgent way, and enjoying every second of it, and all that had suddenly disappeared. A lot of what I do is, in fact, very simple. It's just that my choices are very different to other people. I think if there's any continuity about what I do, it's that we live, and I have always felt that we've lived in a philosophic area of fragmentation, that we don't, that absolutes never were convincing to me. This is the way I do.
Los Angeles in '74, whatever it was. You were still using that technique of cut-ups. Do you still use it, or do you do...
Yeah. Increasingly so, to a great extent on Outside. Even, say, on the new album, Earthling, if you put 3 or 4 disassociated ideas together and created awkward relationships with them, the unconscious intelligence that comes from those pairings is really quite startling sometimes, quite provocative. A friend of mine in San Francisco developed a program for me on the computer, which enables me to do it really quickly.
So instead of going through the laborious process of
cutting things up,
you use your computer.
Yeah, and you can work with far more material. So I'll take articles out of newspapers, poems that I've written, pieces of other people's books, and put them all into this little warehouse of this container of information, and then hit the random button, and it'll randomize everything, and I'll get reams of papers back out of it with interesting ideas. And then I'll either take sentences verbatim as it spews them out, or there might be something within a sentence which triggers off an idea. That's another use of it.
So Bowie at 50 then? You're not intimidated by that?
Not
what
at
about
all.
Bowie the pop star of 50, 55, 60?
I'm really starting to relish that situation. I'm enjoying being a pop star. I like it. It's a lot of fun, especially after this last year, because we've been working live with my band. More than a band. I mean, for me, they're probably the most enjoyable set of musicians that I work with, both in their talents and as people. The greatest fun and satisfaction that I've had with the band since the Spiders. They really are. I think they're just absolutely tremendous. Whatever I do, I get drunk on it. I do tend to do that. I live in excess of myself most of the time.
And do you store away those obsessions for another day and bring them back in, or do you discard them after?
I think they're recurrent. I don't think anything that I get truly passionate about ever leaves me. I mean, it'll show itself. I'll recycle a motif or a method of working, maybe, or a process. And it just seems that the older one gets, you develop a kind of almost an armory of styles and devices. Because I have no style loyalty at all. I just pick and choose what I believe will work best for the job that I want to do.
So who are you writing for now? What about, you say you're a communicator.
Me?
So you say you're a communicator.
Me.
You're only communicating with yourself.
Me. Well, I am fundamentally no different from anybody else. And if I'm writing something that's really exciting me, there has to be someone else that likes it.